Good afternoon, everyone. This is my first time posting anything on YouTube, so bear with me on here. But for Mother's Day, I wanted to do something for my wife and make a tumbler. I bought her one of those cup turners a couple years ago, and it was still in the package. So that's why I bought the cheapest one you could find, because I didn't know that she would ever use it, and so far she hasn't. So I thought, what the heck, I'd give it a try. I watched hours upon hours upon hours of how to make tumblers, how to do this and that. And, they all say the basic, but none of them were really basic on what type of resin to use. Can you put the epoxy over top of stainless without painting it? What if you didn't use glitter? What type of stickers? So I'm going to show you what I did from beginning. Obviously, it's not a perfect one, but hopefully she likes it. Bear with my background because I am at work and I'm doing this after hours because of some place that she can't see me do it. So, first thing I did is I studied epoxies and different types of epoxies and not sure what to buy from Amazon or where to go. So one day I just broke down and went to Hobby Lobby and bought some type of epoxy, and I'm going to talk more about that here in a second, because they're saying that you need X amount of milliliters of this and X amount of milliliters of that, and of what to do. Well, when I get to this here in a second, I'm going to show you how much I actually used. But basically, I went and I bought, it was just a quick coat. I know it's in mirrored thing, but it's a quick coat epoxy, and it's an A and B 1-to-1 ratio. Everything I did read was saying it was best just to buy a 1-to-1 ratio mix because it was way easier to figure out the math on everything you needed to do. The next thing I got, which come with it, which I don't know where I set them, is these little plastic kits, or little plastic measuring cups. They're just medicine dose cups. So, like I said, I'm sorry that everything's in the mirror. I'm trying this, left my stand at home, and this is my first time, but they've got milliliters on the side of it. These cups are very small, so when I got to looking, I was thinking I was getting a great big measuring cup, because everything I'm used to doing is in large quantity sizes, but that's a little bit bigger around than a quarter, and they're that tall, so you can see by my fingers that they're not all that big. Now, when it comes to doing the tumblers, a 1-to-1 ratio, just because I was afraid and I wasn't sure how much it needed, but there's a whole formula. Right here today I'm going to show you a 20-ounce tumbler that I'm doing, but I didn't do clear to the edges. And I went with 15 milliliters, which is ml. Now I took and put a piece of tape, since I wear glasses and I can't see that well, and I put that at 7.5. And I'm with the next top at 15. So I did the first part to the top of the one tape, and then the part B to the other top of that tape. So that way I had 15 milliliters. Now that is for a 20-ounce cup. I'm getting ready to do a couple of 32-ounce cups, so I may go up to the 25 range or something just to make sure. But I mean, I've got a good bit left over. You can see right there after a coat, and that was a heavy coat I put on there. I've yet to use all 15 milliliters on my 20-ounce cup. Now, another thing I read was get these big fat tongue depressors or stirring sticks or craft sticks. Now, this is what I bought because that's what they recommended. Now you can see that stick is about the same width as my thumb. In my opinion, that stick is too wide for these small cups. The kit came with regular popsicle style sticks. God's plenty size. That's all you need. When you start, you'll pour A in, then you will pour B into the cup, and you will just slowly mix around the outside edges, making sure that you get it mixed in. Just take your time. You have plenty of time. Don't worry about feeling like you need to rush. It will eventually turn cloudy. That means you're about halfway there and stirring. Then you will mix some more until it starts to turn clear again. About the time it turns clear, I go for a couple more minutes just to make sure I'm scraping the sides, I'm scraping the bottom. I'm going, just as a thing, I'm going around and around, just scraping the outside edges. I'm picking it up out and I'm folding it into it just like you're folding batter into a cake or whatever. Now the issue with this, and everybody's going to warn you, that you're putting air bubbles into this. And you do. You actually put a lot of air bubbles into this. Now, we can get rid of those air bubbles in a couple of different ways. Since I'm at work and I probably would do it at home, I've just got a little torch and I have the flame set on low. Just low like that, and you just glance it right over it. And then if it doesn't get them all away, wait until the cup is cool to the touch, put the flame back over it, and then wait. Like I said, just be careful that you're not getting dirt or something in there that you think are air bubbles. But if you hold the heat there too long, you will melt the cup. You will maybe melt the table that the cup is sitting on, so be careful on that. A heat gun would probably work just as well. I do not have access to one of them at work, so I just tried it with a torch because I've seen a guy do it on epoxy table and it worked fine. Same thing with your cups. When you're doing your cups, you can take it over there if you get air bubbles. But I touched it with the torch a couple of times, got the heavy air bubbles, tapped the cup on the table a little bit, and then took it back over and touched it with the torch. And like I said, I just kissed it with the heat. You don't want to hold the heat to it. And then, so that is the basic part of mixing the epoxy and getting it ready. The other thing is I wanted to do something a little bit different. I didn't want to epoxy the entire cup, because everything I seen, oh, you're epoxying it clear down around the bottom and you're epoxying it up here, but you need to take an X-Acto knife, and I'm not into all that stuff. Plus, I figured if the bottom didn't get epoxied flat, the cup's going to rock, because I've seen some of them at craft shows and it drove me nuts. So I left it, the bottom unpoxied. What I did, and I seen it and I thought it worked really well, was a young lady on one of these shows. I'm sorry I can't give you credit because I don't remember your name since I've watched so many. Is I took a rubber band and I placed a rubber band around the edge of it to where I wanted the epoxy to stop. Took a measuring tool, which is stick rule is what I used, and I just measured until that rubber band was perfectly straight. Now, one of the flatter, fatter rubber bands is way better than this. I just was the first thing I seen. So, for an example, I just took that rubber band around there, and then I used the electrical tape. Now, this part I wouldn't want to get epoxied, so I stuck the end of the tape over the end of the cup, so I had a tail. So, like that right there. And then I pulled it super tight at an angle, so it's like a slaunch like that going around there. So you can see where it's not. Then I went clear around it, so I've just imagine I'm getting rid of the rubber band because I'm just showing examples. I went clear around it until I've come back to my point right there. So, because what happens is that's very little overlap you have, so you don't have the buildup of the epoxy like you would on anything else. So I brought the tape around, I pulled it tight, followed that rubber band, and as soon as I seen it where it crisscrossed right there at the bottom, as soon as it crisscrossed, when that tape hit that point, I went uphill. And like I said, this is generic, so I'm sorry. And I've made a tail like that. So let me do it up on this part so it looks better, so you can kind of see here. Actually, what I'll do is I will show you on the cup that I'm working on right now. So Excuse my faces of my family. So you can see right there how it comes over the top and goes that way. Follows the edge down. Clear around. But here's where it comes back up, and you can kind of see where it goes up over top. See, here's the bottom. I did the same thing. There's my tail. Starts over, goes at an angle, follows all the way around. Now it'll be a couple of seconds till we get to where we're going, because now we're just back to the starting point. So you can see where it kind of slaunches down. I took my fingernail and I read my fingernail so that fit tight there. And then I just angled up. You can see where I angled up. And then just come over the top and then pinch my tail together. So that way, this way here, I don't have epoxy anywhere on the bottom. I don't have any epoxy from here on the top, so I have a good seal on my lid. Because that was some of the stuff I was really worried about. Now, it has been time, so I'm gonna pause this video and start over, but I wait about 15-20 minutes. The epoxy is still tacky, but I don't want it to dry with the tape on there. So actually I'll leave it going. I'll show you, I'll try to show you on camera here. So I've latex gloves. I go through so many latex gloves, powder-free latex gloves. So everybody can see the cup in the background. So now one thing about that turner is I did try the cups to make sure that the sponge that it came with fit. You can order different size internal sponges or whatever you want to call them for the cups. So make sure whatever you buy it is. This thing is like ran 3 days straight. The motor's not hot. I don't even know what brand it was, but it was like the cheapest thing I could find off Amazon. But I am going to shut the switch off to it. I'm pulling the cup off. Now you see, I pulled the cup off with my tips. I'm going to shove my hand in here where no epoxy's touched it. The reason for the tail on the end is now I'm going to grab, if I grab the right one, which is the right one there, and I should be able to, of course it wants to be a Dickens here. Well, since that's not working right, if you look, I've got a wee little bit of flat spot right there that's stuck. So I'm just taking a generic little utility knife and see, there's the tail, but my tail got flipped over somehow. But I'm just taking a generic little thing, just that way I don't put my finger in any epoxy around here. And I got it peeled up off the bottom. I just took that this little knife and I just kept flaking at it until I got it up off of there. Now I've taken it, and all I'm doing is just gently peeling it around in a circle and coming off. Now this is the part that gets super tricky, because 90% of the time this does not want to come off your glove, but of course that time does. So my next step is I will set the cup down on the side that's not epoxy, and then take this glove off, because I don't want to take the chance of getting any epoxy where I don't want epoxy. Put this hand back down in with the glove, back in the cup, grab what's not epoxied where I had it taped off, which you can see it is a nice clear part. Grab where it's not epoxied with my fingertips. You got to be very gentle on here because it can slide in. Now I'm reaching, finding out what was my ending point, my beginning point. So here's my ending point down inside my cup, where my tail is. I want to do the same thing. I'm just going to slowly peel the tape off away. You know, I went from a dramatic line, but I just want to make sure I'm pulling away from the epoxy. and out of there. Because otherwise what you have to do is you got to take an X-Acto knife and go around there. Okay, here's the good sign of where that tape will not come off your glove and all that stuff. So, you know, now I can grab hold of my glove, peel my glove off, tape, put it inside there. And now I've got a spot that I don't have to worry about my lid sealing. Everything's going to be good here, and no epoxy here. Now you can see there's a bunch of buildup. So we've got to get it back on the turner. I may have taken that off just a hair early for setup. So if you can see, I put it back on the turner, and I'm going to turn it back on. Now I don't know why this does that occasionally. Okay, there we go. So my turner's that way. Now I'm going to show you, if you didn't notice earlier. So, like I said, this is just a cheap motor, a wooden dowel rod going through there, and like a pool noodle in that thing. So, cheap stainless cups from Hobby Lobby, but now that I know what I'm buying, I may buy something different. All I did is just take a bunch of that brown paper like you'd shove into a cardboard box and put it over top of the table on that. Now, to the epoxy side of things. On the very first step, they're going to tell you to take this cup and sand it down, and make sure that you have something that it can stick to. Well, you can see my sand marks in that stainless. I'm not super happy about the sand marks, so this is stainless, but every one of them I showed said, oh, you gotta sand it and paint it. I didn't want painted, I want stainless. I like the stainless look. So I'm sorry about that. And I've seen a bunch of different things about what grit. It doesn't matter. They use 200, 220, 180, this and that. You can sand the crap out of it and not hurt anything. Everything I used was 600 from the beginning to the end. So I took the cup, and where I put the epoxy, I lightly sanded with 600, which put the real little scratch marks on there. My next one, I may try to do it without that, even though it doesn't look super bad. It kind of gives the stainless a little bit of character, but this is probably too smooth for the epoxy to actually stick to. So I will probably always sand that. But the next one, I don't know if I'm going to paint it or not. Like I said, I like the stainless look of things. So I put that in there. Now, the very first coat of epoxy, this has got 4 coats on it. And like I said, I've learned a lot in the process of this one. I sanded it down, and I put 1 coat of epoxy on there as a sealing coat. So it sealed everything off. Everything's good on that thing. Then I went to the stickers. Now, I've read 100 million things about stickers, and you need to use this. This is vinyl stickers that is a friend of mine purchased and cut out with her Cricut, that she printed from a regular printer and printed on the sticker material from not eBay. What was the other one? Amazon. She just printed it. This is matte finish. Now, I know there's gloss and all that stuff. I was told that it does not stick to gloss very well, and to be cautious. If you use regular sticker paper or regular paper, you need to get that hodgepodge and seal the paper, because the epoxy will absorb into the paper and make the paper swell and flake out and stuff like that. So I did not try regular paper on anything. This is actual vinyl stickers, and I put them on the very first coat after it dried. So I put the first coat on there, 10 minutes, peeled the tape off, and then put it back on there I'm putting it on there for almost 24 hours, well, from 5 o'clock at night till roughly 7 a.m. in the morning, because when I leave work and when I come back, it says 8 hours, but like I said, when I come back, it's rock hard on that. So I put the first coat on there. Now, one thing I learned is I've got short, fat fingers, and this finger doesn't work right because I hurt it, so it doesn't straighten out. So what happened was if you look close, I just touched it. I put grooves or waves into the epoxy because of the way my fingers are. They're not flat on that. Now all the shows I watched, them ladies just took that and they held their finger to the side right like this and poured that epoxy right down the edge, and you barely want to touch the thing. Of course, you got latex gloves on, and it's pouring right down the edge of that, and it works perfect except for if you got fat fingers like me and you've got all them grooves. So if you look, it's got waves in the epoxy. What I did the last two coats is I took a Ziploc bag and gently put it over the end of a foam brush, and now I have a nice straight edge. So now, of course, it was too late by the time I learned my lesson on this one, but I've got a lot of those little bellies worked out of it by doing that. So this is how I'm going to do the rest of them. You don't want to pull it too tight because you don't want to make that, you want that foam to be soft. So if you press too hard against it, it works just fine. So that's it. So I put the first coat on there, I sanded it lightly with 600, put all the stickers on there. Well, before I put the stickers on there, I took 91% isopropylene or isopropyl, however you pronounce it, alcohol, and a coffee filter, and poured alcohol in it and wiped what I sanded off. 100 of them said, oh, you need to wash it down real good with Joy dish liquid soap or whatever, Dawn, and get all that sanding stuff off there and get all that oil off there. I just took my time, and I used 2 or 3, well, just on this last coat, I used 2 coffee filters with alcohol, and I just poured some alcohol in the coffee filter and got it damp, wiped it all in one direction, started at the top, wiped down until I got it all there, folded it the other way, re-soaked it, wiped it all down, got another coffee filter, wiped it all down. Then I put my stickers on. That was, again, first coat. Once the sticker was on there, then I put my second coat of epoxy on it and let it sit overnight. Came back in and lightly sanded it the next morning with 600. I concentrated a little bit around the edges just because I know that I don't want it to super build up. I kind of want it to taper. And then same thing down here. Like I said, I just used the bottom of the cup as that. That's where the seam is, so that's why that looks so dramatic on a big one there. But I sanded them so it tapered back a little bit, and then it's covered up. That will turn white almost. Don't let that bother you. Look how clear that is. That's after 4 coats, and I've sanded it in between each coat on everything, and then this is that clear. But I sanded that coat, mixed up another 15 milliliters, 7.5 part A, 7.5 part B, which equals 15. Mixed that up slowly, got the air bubbles out of it. While that was sitting, put the tape on it, and of course, in between each coat, I wiped it down with alcohol in a coffee filter. Never Dawn, nothing, anything like that. And then put my second coat on there over top of the pictures, and I was just going to do 2 coats above the pictures, but if you look right here, some white dots on that is where I actually sanded through the second coat, putting my third coat on there. So when I put my third coat on there, I thought it was a little bit thin, so it just scared me. So that's why I am putting the 4th coat on there. Of course, stuff would have that off so I don't have to speak over top of an air compressor. Sorry about that. But anyhow, that is my 4th actual coat of epoxy on here, just to make sure I've got plenty over top of stickers, just because of scuffs and everything. Now, I'm not saying that this has turned out right, but I was worried about a ton of stuff because you're watching all these videos, you're watching everything, you don't know what to buy. Make sure that whatever epoxy you buy is a food grade epoxy. You don't want to be anything. I know a lot of the ones I've seen for like there's deep pours and thin pours. make sure, you know, you don't need a deep pour. You're not building a table. You're not doing anything. It's a 1/2 inch thick. We're talking a thin layer of epoxy. And yes, that epoxy stuff looks very expensive, but this is 16 fluid ounces or 473 milliliters on here. So I have used 22 and a half milliliters out of that 400, well, actually, sorry, 30 milliliters out of that 470 for 1 cup. So I'm going to tell you that obviously you can get a lot more cups out of that than just this one, you know, and that's because that's 7.5 milliliters per one, so that's 14. So I was, or 15, sorry. So I did 4 pours, so that's where I come up with 30 milliliters. So I've still got 460, or sorry, God, the math today. If I've used 30, that's 443 milliliters roughly, except for what I spilled around the top, that I've got left of this. This was roughly $30 for this kit. And you know, if you went to sell them, you went to do anything, or if you wanted to build a bunch for Christmas, there is plenty of stuff to do there. That's why I'm pouring a little bit extra with the 15, plus it's a round number, easy math, which obviously you can see I'm having an issue with that today on this. Now, one thing I also seen, and I did know that it worked, after this, that edge is a little bit, if it's not crisp like you like it, and I'm worried about getting my thumbnail, it needs cut close. You can see where there's little specks where it went over on things. You can take that utility knife and score a straight line down through there and then come underneath, because what I did already is where I had some of this stuff, I took the utility knife, scored it, and then went underneath of it and just kind of peeled it and then scored it and just kept working it back and forth. And you can peel that over pour off of it and still have a nice looking edge. So, like I said, I'm sorry. I'll try to redo on my next cup. I'm going to see if I can actually walk through and record the steps and blend everything together. And I will show you a little bit more, and maybe it'll turn out better. Like I said, I was scared to death because I had, you know, $6 in a cup, $30 in epoxy, $1 in rubbing alcohol. I don't know how much, you know, just latex gloves I got out of my garage, toothpicks, all this stuff. I thought, man, I'm gonna have a lot of stuff wrapped up and not be able to give my wife a present, which I'm a day late on because of some other stuff. Actually, it's gonna be 2 days late now, but it was not hard at all. And I will be honest with you, since I didn't have the wide, going back a little bit, I did not have the wide rubber bands. I took a couple of zip ties and made it so it was big enough, and then just kept pulling the zip ties tight till it was tight, and that's what I used instead of rubber bands. So for you guys that's out there and want to try something, like I said, this is way less scary than what I thought after doing it. I don't know how much this wood turner was, really cheap. Now that I've got this, and if it works right, I may actually build one, because I know I want to do at least 2 more cups for some people with jokes at work and some pictures and stuff. But if it works out right, I'm hoping that, you know, if my wife sees it, because she's a whole cricket, making all types of crap with her cricket, or whatever, I think that's a cricket, what it's called, and stuff for her classes and other people. She loves to make little trinkets like this. Once she sees how easy it is, we're okay. Now, one warning I would have to also say is when it comes back to this epoxy, you know, you may need a respirator, because in a well-ventilated place. I'm at work in a well-ventilated place. I'm not doing it in my basement or anything. So the epoxy smell is not that strong, but I'm also not over top of it breathing it or anything. So here is the next cup I'm working on, this style cup. So it's a 32 ounce, I think it says on the bottom somewhere, it said whatever, but you know, this is a $9 cup. One thing I did read that everything has to be double insulated, so it can't just be a flat cup in here, because if you pour any type of hot liquid inside of it and it's not a double layered cup, that epoxy will pop right off of it. Now my wife doesn't drink coffee, so